Ethan had never thought he'd share a room with someone who wasn't human. When the university sent out the notice about the Interstellar Cultural Exchange program, he laughed at first, thinking it was a publicity stunt. But a week later, the door to his dorm room opened, and an alien woman stepped inside, quiet, graceful, and so different that for a moment he forgot how to breathe. Her name was Tisai, and she came from a planet called Lurian, far beyond the Orion Belt. Her skin had a soft silver shimmer, as if moonlight lived beneath it, and her eyes were pale gray, deep like still water. She carried only one metallic bag, no boxes, no decorations, nothing personal. She looked around the small dorm room like someone exploring another world for the first time. Ethan stood awkwardly by his desk. Hi, I'm Ethan," he said, offering a small smile. "Guess we're roommates," Tsai nodded once. Her voice was gentle, almost musical. "I am honored to share space with you." Her words were perfectly clear, but her tone carried a strange sadness, as if every sentence cost her something. The first few days were quiet. She spoke little, always polite but distant. She kept her side of the room perfectly organized. Every item lined up neatly, every piece of clothing folded with precision. When she moved, it was almost soundless, her steps light as if gravity barely touched her. Ethan tried to make conversation, but most times she'd just nod or give short answers. He noticed she never ate with him. She drank something blue and faintly glowing from a small flask, saying it was enough for her needs. She didn't seem to sleep much either. Sometimes, in the middle of the night, Ethan would wake up to faint sounds, soft humming or a whisper in a language he couldn't understand. It wasn't frightening, just lonely. One night he turned over and saw her standing near the window looking up at the stars. Her face was half lit by the pale glow of Earth's moon, and for a moment she looked lost, like someone staring at ghosts. "Couldn't sleep?" Ethan asked quietly. Tsai turned her head slightly. "Your moon is beautiful," she said softly. "It reminds me of home." Before what?" he asked, but she didn't answer. She only looked back at the sky and whispered something so faint he couldn't catch the words. The next day, Ethan noticed something else. She always flinched when loud noises happened. Doors slamming, laughter in the hallway, thunder in the distance. Her silver eyes would widen, and her hands would curl tight like she was bracing for impact. When he asked if she was okay, she'd smile faintly and say, "I am not used to this world yet." He tried to respect her silence, but curiosity kept tugging at him. There was something fragile about her, not weak, but as if she carried invisible cracks inside. Sometimes he'd catch her touching a small pendant she wore around her neck. It was shaped like a spiral, glowing faintly blue, almost alive. Whenever she held it, her expression softened, then quickly turned sorrowful. A week later, during dinner, a few students approached Ethan in the cafeteria. "Hey, you're the guy with the alien roommate, right?" one said, grinning. "She ever talk? Or does she just float around all mysterious and silent?" Ethan frowned. "She talks. Just not much." They laughed and walked off, but the comment bothered him. He realized that while others were curious about her as some strange being, he saw her as someone lonely, someone trying to survive in a world that didn't understand her. That night, when he came back to the dorm, she was sitting on the floor by the window again. The room lights dimmed. The faint hum of her pendant filled the silence. She looked up when he entered, eyes shimmering faintly. "Is Earth always this loud?" she asked. Ethan chuckled softly. "Yeah, kind of comes with the territory." She nodded slowly. "It is strange. On Lurian, silence was sacred. Here, silence feels like a memory that is fading." Her words lingered in his mind long after he turned off the light. Later that night, he woke again, and this time, she wasn't by the window. She was sitting near her bed, trembling, whispering in her language. Her voice was filled with pain. Ethan wanted to speak, to ask if she was okay. But something about the way she held her pendant, like it was the only thing keeping her alive, stopped him. He lay back down, staring at the ceiling, listening to her soft whispers fade into silence. He didn't know it yet, but that night was the beginning of something deeper, something that would change both their lives forever, because soon he'd learn why Tisai couldn't sleep alone, and the truth would break his heart. The days passed slowly, each one like a quiet river flowing through the dorm. Ethan and Tisai had not spoken much beyond greetings and small exchanges. but an unspoken connection was growing. He noticed the little things, the way she tilted her head when listening, the way her silver eyes caught the sunlight and reflected it like liquid metal, and the way she lingered a fraction longer near his desk when he hummed a tune he had learned in music class. One afternoon, he found her staring at a campus map, tracing the paths with her delicate fingers. "You like Earth maps?" he asked, leaning against the doorway. She looked up, a faint smile forming. "They are confusing, but they are beautiful." "Confusing how?" he asked, curious. "They have lines, borders, names. On Lurian we move as one. We do not divide space with words," she said softly, her gaze drifting toward the window. "I try to understand your ways, but it is different." Ethan nodded, feeling a strange mix of awe and sadness. He realized how alone she must feel. A mind built for another world, trying to adapt to a place that would never be truly hers. At night, he noticed her whispering less, yet still humming. The hums were strange, like melodies made from silver wind, soft and sorrowful. Sometimes they wrapped around him, soothing and strange, like a lullaby from another universe. He began leaving his own soft hums in reply, simple, human songs, and then noticed she would pause, listening, letting the room feel calmer. One evening, as the sky turned pink and gold with the setting sun, Ethan sat at his desk doing homework. He glanced over to see Tisai standing near the window, gazing at the horizon. "Do you miss your home?" he asked softly. Her silver eyes turned to him, reflecting the last rays of the sun. "Miss is not strong enough word," she said. "I left before the last echoes ended. I cannot return. I only move forward." Ethan's heart clenched. He didn't ask what last echoes meant, but he could sense it carried pain deeper than anything he had ever known. All he could do was nod and offer her a small, gentle smile. Days turned into weeks, and their quiet companionship deepened. Tsai started sitting closer during meals, though she never ate much. She listened when he talked about his life, his family, even his favorite shows, though she often tilted her head, curious, trying to understand human emotions. Ethan, in turn, began noticing moments of vulnerability. The way her hands trembled slightly when loud sounds echoed through the dorm, the way she flinched at sudden movements, the fleeting shadows of fear crossing her face when something reminded her of something he could not imagine. One night, Ethan woke to a strange sound, a soft scrape, almost like fingernails on metal. He sat up, blinking in the dark. There she was, standing near the edge of his bed, shoulders shaking, whispering in her language. Her voice trembled, carrying grief and fear and something he could not name. "Tsai," he whispered, careful not to startle her. She looked at him, her eyes wide and luminous, full of something raw and human despite her alien features. I cannot sleep," she murmured. "When I close my eyes, the dreams find me." "The dreams?" he asked gently. She nodded, hugging her knees. "The memories of my people. They reach me in sleep. I hear them. I feel them. All the voices. All the loss." Ethan's chest tightened. He did not understand fully, but he understood enough. She was carrying a weight no human could imagine. His first instinct was to leave her space, to not intrude, but looking at her trembling figure, he knew that would be wrong. "Do you want to stay here?" he asked softly. She hesitated, her gaze dropping to the floor. "If you allow it," he nodded. "You can." For the first time, she sat near him on the floor, knees tucked close, her head resting lightly on the edge of his bed. She didn't speak again that night, only breathed quietly and slowly. The tremors in her body faded. Ethan stayed awake, listening to her soft, even breaths, feeling an unfamiliar warmth, a quiet human warmth of companionship, of being trusted, of sharing the dark without fear. When he finally drifted to sleep, he realized something important. She had chosen to trust him with her fear, not with words but with presence. That night he understood that her silence was not emptiness, but a space waiting to be filled by kindness and patience. And though he did not know the full story yet, he felt the first stirrings of something extraordinary. The fragile connection between a human and an alien, bridging worlds built not on strength or power, but on empathy. Ethan would soon learn that this trust was the first step toward saving her from the darkness she carried. And in the process, she would teach him the true meaning of courage, hope, and the quiet power of human compassion. It was a quiet evening when Tisai approached Ethan in a way she never had before. The room was dimly lit, the hum of the city outside filtering softly through the window. Ethan was finishing up some homework and the air felt heavier than usual. He glanced up and saw her standing near his bed, hands folded in front of her, eyes lowered, as if the words she wanted to speak were heavy and dangerous. "Ethan," she said softly, her voice trembling ever so slightly. "May I sleep near you tonight?" Ethan froze. "Sleep near me?" he asked, trying to mask the surprise in his voice. She nodded slowly. "I cannot rest. When I am alone, the dreams find me." He blinked, his mind racing. The way she said it. It was not a request made lightly. Something in her tone carried weight, pain, and fear, all wrapped in the simplest of words. He hesitated, unsure of what to say, but then he remembered the trembling he had seen in her eyes on the night she whispered alone. "Of course," he said finally, moving a little to make space on the floor beside his bed. "You can stay here." Tesai's silver eyes flickered with something almost like relief. She lowered herself carefully to the floor, curling up with her knees drawn close to her chest. Her movements were precise, careful not to disturb him, not to take more space than necessary. Even as she settled, she looked small, vulnerable, and utterly human despite her alien appearance. Ethan watched her for a moment, unsure how to feel. He had never had anyone lean on him like this, not even his closest friends. Yet here was an alien from a world he could not imagine, placing her trust in him in the simplest, most profound way possible, by choosing to be close when she was most afraid. He turned off the desk lamp, letting the soft glow of the city lights fall across the room. Say's breathing, quiet and steady, became the only sound besides the distant hum of traffic. He wanted to speak, to reassure her, but the right words eluded him. Instead, he stayed still, offering her the silent companionship she had asked for. For hours, neither moved. Ethan felt a strange peace in the room. The fear that had haunted her seemed to ease slightly with his presence. Her eyes, which had always held traces of sorrow, now relaxed into a semblance of calm. It was fragile, delicate, and yet enough to fill the space between them with warmth. Later, as the night deepened, Tesai shifted slightly, her head brushing against the edge of his bed. She didn't speak, but her small movements told him more than words ever could. She was seeking comfort, safety, and something she had not felt in a long time, the quiet reassurance that she was not alone. Ethan, though he had never expected to be in this position, found himself embracing the responsibility. He realized that her courage was not in facing her fears alone, but in daring to share them. She had chosen him to witness her vulnerability, and in that choice, he found a strange pride, and the pride of being human, of being capable of offering warmth where fear had lived. That night, Ethan learned something he had never known before. Humans often prided themselves on strength, on accomplishments and bravery. But real courage, he realized, was simpler and purer. It was being willing to hold space for someone else's pain, without judgment, without expectation, just with presence. Sai slept peacefully for the first time in weeks. Her breathing evened out, her trembling ceased, and her silver eyes, when they fluttered open in the small hours, reflected trust. Ethan watched her for a moment, feeling a connection that defied words, a bond between two beings from different worlds finding solace in proximity. The night passed slowly, quietly, and when the first rays of sunlight filtered through the blinds, he realized something profound. She had not needed him to save her from the dreams entirely, but she had needed someone to stand beside her while she faced them, and he had been that someone. Tesai looked at him when she stirred, her eyes soft, luminous. She whispered a single word in her alien language, something he didn't understand, but the meaning was clear. Gratitude. Ethan smiled softly, the weight of the moment settling gently on his shoulders. He didn't need her words. Her presence said enough, and in that quiet small dorm room, two souls, one human, one alien, had discovered the first fragile threads of trust, compassion, and understanding that would carry them through all the nights to come. From that night on, it became their ritual. When fear came, when dreams threatened to overwhelm her, Tesai would sleep near him. She never asked for more, never demanded. She simply sought safety. And in return, Ethan gave her something more than shelter. The quiet proof that kindness could cross worlds. The next week, Ethan noticed a change in Tesai. She moved more quietly than ever, her silver eyes flickering with shadows that he hadn't seen before. The soft hum she sometimes made at night had a different tone now, deeper, almost haunted. He wanted to ask her what was wrong, but the words never seemed right. He could feel her pain, but he didn't know how to reach it. One evening, Ethan found her outside the dorm, standing on the small terrace, staring at the stars. Her fingers traced invisible patterns in the air, like she was trying to touch constellations he could barely see. The wind caught her hair, brushing it softly across her face, but she didn't move to push it away. She seemed fragile yet unyielding. "Tsai," he called gently, stepping closer. "Are you okay?" She turned slowly, her eyes meeting his. For a moment, he thought he saw something he hadn't seen before. Fear, raw and unshielded, mixed with a quiet sorrow that made his chest tighten. She said nothing for a few seconds, just looked at the stars as if searching for answers in the endless sky. Finally, she spoke. Her voice was barely a whisper, trembling. "Ethan, my people. We hear the memories of others in dreams." He frowned, trying to understand. "Memories of others?" She nodded, looking down at her hands. "It is how we stay connected. It is how we feel. The past, the lives of those we loved and lost, but..." Her silver eyes glimmered with a faint, painful light. "When my world burned, I heard them all die. All their voices, screaming inside me, I left. Before the last echoes ended, Ethan's heart ached. The weight of her words was heavier than anything he had imagined. Thousands of lives, thousands of voices, all burned into her mind. He could see the tremor in her shoulders, the tightness in her hands, and he realized that her quiet demeanor had always been her way of carrying unbearable pain. I can't even imagine," he said softly, not wanting to break the fragile trust she had placed in him. She shook her head, a single silver strand falling across her cheek. "You should not try. Humans, you do not understand. But I am haunted. When I close my eyes, I still hear them. All of them." Ethan stepped closer, unsure what to do, but knowing that leaving her alone now would be cruel. "You don't have to face it alone," he said gently. "Not here. Not with me." Her eyes widened slightly. You would let me?" He nodded. "If you want to stay near me, you can. I won't leave." A strange, almost imperceptible relief passed through her. She lowered herself onto the terrace floor, drawing her knees to her chest, and for the first time let herself tremble openly. Ethan sat beside her, careful to respect her space, and waited. They stayed like that for a long time, side by side, neither speaking. The stars above felt vast but somehow smaller, intimate. Tsai's breathing slowly steadied and the shadows in her eyes softened. "I do not know why," she whispered finally. "But near you, it quiets the memories, the screams. They are less loud. I do not know why I feel safe with a human." Ethan reached out tentatively, placing a hand near hers. She flinched at first, then slowly, ever so slowly, let him hold her fingers. They were cool, fragile, and trembling, a reminder of everything she had endured. "You are not alone," he said quietly. "You don't have to be." She looked at him, silver eyes glistening, and whispered words he didn't understand. But the meaning was clear. Gratitude, trust, and a faint glimmer of hope. For the first time since she had arrived, Tsai seemed lighter. The haunted air around her eased, and she leaned slightly closer, letting her head rest gently near his shoulder. Ethan felt the warmth of her presence, and with it a quiet understanding. Compassion, even from one human, could cross worlds. He realized something profound in that moment. Humans were fragile, yes. They could break. But they could also offer courage, hope, and comfort where fear and grief had ruled. Standing beside Tsai, he felt the truth of it. Being human was not about power or conquest. It was about the ability to share burdens, to heal in ways that words alone could never express. And Tsai, this alien from a world he could barely imagine, had chosen him to do just that. In the silent night, the stars above bore witness to a bond forming between two very different beings, connected not by similarity but by understanding, trust, and the quiet courage of sharing pain with another soul. Ethan didn't know what the future held, but he understood this. Some nights, simply being near someone was enough to heal the deepest wounds. And he would stay as long as she needed him. The quiet of the dorm had become a fragile rhythm. Nights no longer felt empty, and mornings carried the faint warmth of unspoken understanding. Ethan had grown used to Tsai's presence, and she, in turn, seemed to find comfort in his steady human ways. But some nights the fear returned, sharp and unwelcome, like a shadow that refused to fade. It was one such night when Ethan woke to the soft sound of shivering. Sai was on the floor beside his bed, knees drawn tightly to her chest, her silver eyes wide and glistening in the faint light. She whispered in her language, a string of words that flowed like wind over distant mountains, a language he could not understand, but the emotion behind it was unmistakable: fear, sorrow, and longing. Ethan swallowed hard and knelt beside her.
Say,
"It's okay," he said softly, his hand hovering near hers, unsure if she would allow him to touch. "I'm here. You're safe." For a moment she didn't move, her gaze fixed on some point beyond him, as if the memories behind her eyes had weight that no words could lift. Slowly she shifted, leaning just slightly closer to him, letting the tremor in her shoulders ease against his presence. "Do you feel them again?" he asked gently, referring to the voices she had once described. The memories of her people, their screams, their last moments. She nodded, her breath catching. They come at night. Even here I hear them. I cannot escape. They do not end." Ethan's heart ached. He could not take away her past, could not silence the echoes of a world destroyed. But he could be there, he could stay, and for now that had to be enough. He sat down on the floor, letting his legs rest beside hers. "Then stay with me tonight," he said quietly. "Lean on me. You don't have to face it alone." Tsai's eyes met his, silver and deep, and in them he saw something rare. Trust, hesitant, fragile, but unmistakable. She slowly extended her hand, letting his fingers brush hers. The touch was small, almost timid, but it was enough to anchor her trembling. Hours passed. Outside, the city murmured with life, distant car horns and faint music weaving through the night. Inside the dorm, the two shared silence, a silence that no longer felt empty but protective. Ethan began to hum softly, a human lullaby he had learned as a child, hoping the familiar notes would weave through the alien fear that haunted her. She paused her whispering, listening, letting the soft vibrations of his voice wrap around her like a fragile shield. A single tear escaped her eye, tracing a silver line down her cheek. Ethan gently wiped it away, careful not to startle her. "It's okay," he whispered. "You're not alone anymore." For the first time in weeks, Tsai's trembling eased. She shifted a little closer, laying her head near his shoulder. Ethan felt her heartbeat, rapid, fragile, yet steadying, and he realized something profound. Her need for proximity was not just for comfort, but a lifeline, a way to anchor herself against memories that would otherwise drown her. "Humans," she murmured softly, half asleep. "You break so easily. Yet, you reach out." Ethan smiled faintly, brushing a loose strand of silver hair from her face. "Maybe that's how we heal," he said. "By reaching out, even when we are afraid." She exhaled slowly, a sigh that seemed to carry centuries of sorrow and longing. "You are strange," she whispered, a ghost of a smile touching her lips. I do not deserve this." "Care. You deserve it," he said firmly. "You've survived what most couldn't. You carry more than anyone should, and that is why I'll stay." The night passed slowly yet peacefully. Each soft hum, each quiet touch, each whispered word built a bridge between two worlds. One human, one alien, showing that compassion could be a language more powerful than any spoken tongue. When the first rays of dawn began to filter through the window, Tsai stirred and lifted her head. Her eyes, silver and glimmering, met Ethan's. She whispered a single word, her alien syllables filled with gratitude, hope, and something unspoken yet unmistakable: trust. Ethan reached out and held her hand once more. "Always," he said softly. And in that moment, the quiet dorm room held more warmth than either of them had known in years. Outside, the world continued, unaware of the small miracle inside. A human and an alien, two souls bound together not by necessity but by the simple, extraordinary power of care, and Ethan knew, without a doubt, that he would face any night, any fear, alongside her. It started quietly at first, a low rumble in the distance, almost like the growl of a restless beast. Ethan was in the middle of tidying up their small dorm room when the first flash of lightning lit the sky outside. Tsai froze immediately, her silver eyes wide and shimmering in the flickering light. Her body stiffened, her hands clutching at her chest as though trying to hold herself together against a memory no one else could see. "Hey, it's just a storm," Ethan said gently, moving closer. "Thunder. Nothing more." She shook her head, her voice barely audible. "Note, it is not the same." The sound, "It is the same." Ethan's heart tightened. He had seen her flinch at loud noises before, but never like this. It was not surprise or annoyance. It was raw fear, a terror that seemed to seep from her very bones. He crouched beside her, careful to avoid startling her further. "It's okay," he whispered. "I'm right here. You're safe." The storm outside roared louder, lightning cracking across the sky like the roar of some distant battlefield. Say's eyes glistened and she began to whisper low, urgent words in her language, words that Ethan could not understand. But the fear in them was unmistakable. Without thinking, he reached out, gently placing an arm around her shoulders. She flinched at first, but the tremor in her body slowly eased as she leaned into him. Ethan held her close, careful not to push, careful to let her feel the simple truth, that she was not alone, that no matter how loud or terrifying the world seemed, he would stay. Minutes passed. The storm raged outside, lightning painting the room in harsh white flashes, thunder shaking the windows. But inside, the dorm room became a small island of calm. Sai clung to him, her small body trembling against his side, whispering her fears. Ethan did not speak. He simply held her, letting the steady beat of his heart become an anchor against the chaos. "You're not the storm," he murmured softly. "You don't have to fight it alone. I'm here." For the first time, she let herself be completely vulnerable. Tears slid down her silver cheeks, tracing lines that shimmered in the dim light. Her breathing gradually slowed as Ethan murmured old human lullabies, soft and gentle, his voice a tether to safety in a world that had taught her nothing but fear. Somewhere deep inside, Ethan felt a strange sense of awe. She was an alien, a being from another world who had endured horrors he could barely imagine. And yet here she was, allowing him to comfort her, letting a human presence soothe the memories that haunted her. It was a quiet bravery, a trust that transcended worlds. When the storm finally began to fade, leaving only the soft patter of rain against the window, Sai lifted her head slightly. Her silver eyes were wet but calmer, her lips curved in the faintest, almost shy smile. "I am sorry," she whispered. "You should not have to carry my fear." Ethan shook his head, pressing a hand to hers. "You've carried it alone for too long," he said gently. "It's okay to share the weight. That's what friends do. That's what humans do." For a long while they sat together, rain tapping softly, a quiet bond forming in the aftermath of fear. Sai rested her head lightly on his shoulder, her small frame trembling now only with residual shivers. Ethan felt a quiet warmth in his chest, a sense of purpose and connection stronger than anything he had felt before. It was in that moment he realized something important. Humanity's greatest power was not strength, not weapons, not knowledge. It was the ability to care, to stand beside someone in their darkest hours, to offer presence when words could not. Sai, from a world beyond the stars, had found that power in him. And in return, she had taught him something too, that courage was not always loud or visible. Sometimes courage was quiet, fragile, and entirely about allowing yourself to be there for someone else. As the storm cleared, the first rays of dawn filtered through the blinds, painting the room with soft gold light. Sai stirred slightly, lifting her head to look at Ethan. Her silver eyes were soft, luminous, and for the first time filled not with fear, but something new. Trust, gratitude, and a faint glimmer of hope. Ethan smiled gently. "Always," he whispered, holding her hand. "I'll always be here." In the quiet after the storm, the dorm room felt like a sanctuary. Outside, the world went on, unaware of the small miracle inside, an alien from a distant planet, and a human who had chosen to stand by her, finding in each other a connection that defied distance, species in the darkness of memory. And in that quiet, two hearts, one human, one alien, discovered the simple, extraordinary truth that sometimes just being present for someone is enough to heal even the deepest wounds. The dawn was soft and pale, spilling light across the dorm room in delicate ribbons. Outside, the city was waking, but inside a quiet stillness lingered, a calm after the storm, Ethan sat on the edge of his bed, his hand still resting lightly over Tisai's as she stirred beside him. Her silver eyes blinked open, reflecting the gentle sunlight, and for a moment she seemed fragile. Then she spoke, her voice trembling but steady. "Ethan, do you know why I sleep near you?" He gave a small, curious smile. "Because I make the silence kind?" he replied, trying to meet her gaze without sounding uncertain. She shook her head slowly, the faint light catching the silver sheen in her hair. "No, it is not that. Entirely." Her eyes looked distant, thoughtful, as if reaching across years and worlds. "When I am near you, I feel something my people had forgotten long ago, something lost before the war, before everything changed." Ethan's breath caught. "What is it?" Her lips curved into a small, almost shy smile. "Hope," she whispered. The word hung in the room, fragile but powerful, like a spark in the dark. Ethan felt it resonate through him, through the long nights of fear, whispers, and trembling. He had seen her haunted by memories of fire and loss, seen her tremble from pain he could not imagine, and yet here, in this quiet dawn, she spoke a word so human, so simple, and yet it carried the weight of her trust. "You found hope in me?" he asked softly. Sai nodded. Her eyes shimmered, reflecting a universe of sorrow and healing. I do not fully understand it myself. Only that near you the shadows are lighter. The screams fade. I can breathe." Ethan felt a warmth spread through his chest, a quiet pride that was not about him but about what humanity could do. Humans were fragile, yes, but they were also capable of extraordinary kindness. They could offer comfort where fear reigned, presence where loneliness dwelled, and in that simple act they could heal wounds no one else could touch. "You don't need to explain more," he said gently. "I don't need to understand everything, I'll be here, always." Tisai leaned closer, her head resting near his shoulder. The small rise and fall of her breathing was steady now, calm. For the first time since she had arrived on Earth, she seemed entirely present, not haunted, not hiding. Just alive, fragile and luminous, yet unafraid. "Humans," she murmured softly, almost to herself. "You are strange. You break easily, yet you still reach out. You offer your hands. Even when the world is heavy, you do not fear the weight of another." Ethan smiled. "Maybe that's the best part of being human," he said quietly. "We may break, but we can also heal. We can carry each other when it gets too much." She tilted her head, a faint laugh escaping her, the first real laugh he had heard from her. It was soft, silver-tinted, like wind through trees. "Then, I am fortunate," she whispered, "to have found you." The words filled the room with warmth. Ethan could feel the bond that had been growing over weeks of quiet companionship, of whispered fears and shared silences, solidifying into something rare and extraordinary. Mutual trust, understanding, and the fragile, beautiful spark of hope. They sat together, letting the soft light of morning wrap around them. Outside, the world carried on, unaware of the miracle inside. A human and an alien, two beings from different stars, bridging the gap between worlds with nothing but care, courage, and quiet presence. Sai lifted her gaze to Ethan, eyes shimmering like starlight. "You have given me something my people forgot, something I thought I would never feel again, and I will treasure it always." Ethan squeezed her hand gently. "And I will be here every night, every fear, every silence. You are never alone." In that simple moment, two lives, one human, one alien, connected across time, space, and grief. The room was quiet, yet it spoke volumes of resilience, trust, and the extraordinary power of care. For Tisai, the nightmares of her past would always be a part of her. But now she had something stronger, a human who understood, who stayed, who offered hope when everything else had fallen away. And for Ethan, she had shown him a truth more profound than any knowledge he had ever gained, that humanity's greatest strength was not in conquering, but in healing, in being present, in offering love without expectation. As the sun rose higher, painting their small room in warm gold, Tisai curled up slightly closer to Ethan. He wrapped an arm around her gently, feeling the quiet beat of her heart against his, and in the silence that followed there was peace, there was trust, there was hope, a fragile light in the darkness, enough to carry them both forward. In that quiet dorm room across worlds and species, two souls had discovered the extraordinary truth. Sometimes, just being there for someone else is enough to change everything. The end.